have a setup. I know we've said that before.
We say that every
time, but I think we've got it. Now we do have to actually buy our own camera because eventually the people that we borrowed it from are going to want it back.
Oh, well.
But we're just going to buy the same camera. So that's fine. And we have our table.
Maybe we'll get things level. Like everything looks a little lopsided, but it's okay.
I think our building might be lopsided.
That's actually a really
and this
intelligent observation.
This shelf was old when I started in 2008.
Yeah.
And
I miss my shelf. I kind of want it back.
We painted it in 2013 to pretend that it wasn't old.
Oh, I can see that now. I never knew that.
But like it was painted. Okay, so this is actually really funny. So before my church was my church.
Okay.
They came to do a work day at what was then the Newcastle office. And it's awesome because that's like how I met them, and I met the pastor, and I met my friend Anne Marie, and she invited us because we were looking for a place in Newcastle because we were moving from Beaver Falls to Newcastle.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, yeah, we're gonna try it. Sounds great. And Maya was 4 at the time, and she helped paint the shelf, and now she's like 17.
Well, she did a good job.
She did a great job. And her grandfather at the time, who was our pastor, our pastor at the time, was like, I can't believe you're letting a 4-year-old paint the shelf. And I was like, but she's so cute.
Like, she's got to.
She's so cute. She's so cute. She's just big now. Like, grown, I should say. Probably shouldn't refer to a teenager. She won't see this, so it's fine. Yeah. But she's still cute. Anyway, so yes, we're trying. We're getting there. I think we're doing much better than we started. And we are officially ready. If you have feedback, I think we're emotionally ready to hear it.
It's true. Yeah. I think we're okay now.
Yeah. So if you have thoughts, we'd love to hear your thoughts on content. So we've already had some people reach out and say like, hey, we'd love to hear about this topic or that topic. And we're absolutely going to work that into our rotation. But if you have thoughts about like even like the setting, or especially if you have like concrete suggestions.
Or if you have skill to help us fix the problem that you were pointing out.
Like if you're just going to be like, wow, that's terrible. That's not going to help. Like, because we probably don't know how to fix it. But if you know how to fix it, or if you know someone who can fix it and you have a suggestion, let us know. And obviously content, we always want to hear thoughts, questions, ideas on that. But today, most parents right now are in the throes, I'm going to call it the throes of back to school.
Yeah.
So I have a lot of children, as I've referenced before. We homeschool, and I've had people say, oh my goodness, how do you homeschool and work full time? I have a spouse.
Okay.
So, like...
That's cheating, but okay.
He actually does all the work. Like, people always ask, like, how do you do that and work? And I'm like, well, I don't.
You don't.
I don't. Like, I'm not at home, like, educating my children and then coming in and working all day. Like, that's impossible. So my husband and I we homeschool together. I do a lot of, like, the setup for the year. Like, I'll print up, like, the calendar, and we work together to pick curriculum, and then I like order everything, and then I do like field trips and stuff like that. I mean, homeschooling.
All the fun stuff.
Yeah, I do fun stuff, and he's stuck like making.
Anthony's like grading math.
Yes. So we are 100% in back to school at home. We ordered the last of the curriculum last night. It should be here like in a couple days. And then a couple of my older kids are doing like an online curriculum. It's not cyber school. It's still homeschool, but it's like an online curriculum. So I'm setting that up for them. But the thing is, like, the thing that kills me, the thing that's tough is because we have 4 older kids and then we have the babies. They all have different interests. And so even though we really limit how many extracurricular activities they do, it still ends up being a ton.
Yeah.
And I don't think like, we probably do less than most families, and I still feel like we're just running constantly. But yeah, we're getting all of that stuff is ramping up again. Church activities for youth are ramping up again. And this week in our area is our local county fair, and I always feel like it's like the end of summer. Like once the fair is over, fall is here, school is here.
It's pumpkin spice season, baby.
It's apple cider season.
Sure. I'll take all of it.
Oh,
maple syrup season.
Yes, maple is good. I'm not a big pumpkin spice person.
I am. Like I'm like in line. I'm in line the day that it comes out at the coffee chain that we're not going to name because they support Planned Parenthood. But
so you're buying Planned Parenthood pumpkin spice.
Yeah.
It's good to know how far your morals.
I drive a Planned Parenthood car. I can't boycott everything. Like I don't know what to tell.
Has its own car?
No, but like Honda donates money to Planned Parenthood, and I can't not have a car, and Honda's reliable, so that's why I don't boycott stuff usually. But
that's all right. You can redeem it by driving it for pro-life purposes.
I do. Like, I get my Starbucks, and then I go do pro-life things
while drinking it.
Yeah, so it works. Okay. And I'm in line like the day it comes out. I already know what the menu at Dunkin' Donuts is going to be. It's going to be good.
Okay.
I'm ready.
All right.
I could just feel my Ugg boots are like whispering out of the closet. They're like, come get me out. It's time. It doesn't matter if it's 90 degrees outside.
You're going to
be I do have a pair of Ugg boots.
They're
I'm going to bust them out. They're in. It's the cycle. It's come back.
It's sad.
It really is sad. But also chunky highlights are coming back. And it's like, so you'll be thrilled. And mine are like unintentionally chunky right now. So
no, it means chunky highlights. Like my hairstylist did my highlights, and I was like, but they're so like blended. They're not like in your face. They're not like highlights.
So it's the cycle. It's continuing.
Yeah. Chunky heels, chunky highlights, Ugg boots.
Mm-hmm.
Everything will be square. Yep. So if you are a parent, you are probably also in the middle of back to school, whether you are doing public school, private school, homeschool. You should definitely do one of those three. You should definitely educate your children.
Yeah.
Pro-child education here. Yeah. And I homeschool. That does not mean that I think it's the best option for everyone. I think it's a great option. I think it's a great option for a lot of people. I wish more people felt free to try it because I think there's a lot of fear surrounding trying homeschool. But I'm also not going to be like, oh, I can't believe you sent your kids to public school. It's
the best like solution for some kids. Yeah. Like I have nieces and nephews that go to public school because it's the best for them. And their public school district is actually really nice. So like here in Western Pennsylvania,
it depends.
It really depends on the school district. Yeah. So it's not for everybody, but it is for a lot of people.
And if you're going to do it, regardless, you're responsible for your kid, right? Like you're responsible for your kid to be educated, for your kid to be well-rounded, for your child to have an education in the Lord and know about the church and the Bible and those kinds of things. And I think if you're going to have your child in public school and not in a Christian school or homeschool, you have to be even more intentional because it's so easy to let those things just push out church and God, and because school takes up so much time, and then you have homework, and then you have extracurriculars, and you have all these things. Right. But every parent needs to make sure that their child is getting time with church and the Lord and spiritual things. So you just have to do that.
Yeah.
But because it's back to school, we're going to talk a little bit about sex.
Yeah.
So we're going to talk about our Healthy Relationships Today program. We're going to talk about how we talk to kids about abstinence and boundaries, and we're going to talk about the new term for abstinence. Mm-hmm. And we're just going to like kind of clear up some misconceptions about abstinence education. And then we also have kind of a charge for parents. So I'm going to let Mikayla explain the HRT program. So we started it. It's actually one of our oldest running programs. Absolutely love it. It's older than medical. I think the only thing that might be older is parenting. I think
probably.
I think everything else.
I was going to make a joke, but it would not go over well with any of the staff members I was going to joke about.
Nope. I don't even know what you were going to say, but we're going to just slide past that. So it's one of our oldest programs. It's been around since the early 2000s. And one of our staff, Mary Jo, and our volunteers, Christy, well, she was a staff member then. They ran it for a long time. And then Mikayla ran it. And then she passed the torch to Lydia, who passed the torch to Lydia, who passed the torch to Lydia. Yeah. So that's the three separate people, in case you're wondering. So I'm going to let you explain a little bit of the history, why we call it Healthy Relationships Today, and who's running it today.
Sure. So Healthy Relationships Today is our abstinence department.
Right.
And so what we do, or what they do rather, because I'm out of it now, but what I did back in the olden days, pre-pandemic, was we go into school districts and we are able to talk about abstinence and what a healthy relationship looks like with teenagers. And so we speak with the middle schoolers and with high schoolers in most of the local school districts to us. And sometimes that could be a family consumer science class or a health class. It just kind of depends on the school district as to where we fit in. But one of the benefits of living in Pennsylvania is that currently it's still on the books that we have to teach abstinence in our schools.
Yes.
They are constantly trying to overthrow that, but they have been unsuccessful so far.
Thank you, Jesus.
Thank you, Jesus. And so they have to teach abstinence. It is a requirement in our public schools. And a lot of the public schools don't want to teach abstinence. And so we have the benefit because it's awkward and like, or they just don't support it. And they're like, I don't want to teach this, but they have to. And so we are in a unique position where we can slide right on in, and we're like, we know that you don't want to teach this. And so we will do it for free, and we will come in and we'll make it fun, and we will cover everything that the state requires be covered and engage with the students, and you get to sit back and just prep for your other classes. And so we typically do anywhere from 3 to 5 days. It's flexible, and some schools have us for longer, and some schools it's just a couple days of just talking with the students about age appropriate content regarding sexual activity and healthy relationships. And so in middle school, it's much more focused on relationships and just what a healthy relationship could look like. What kind of boundaries should you have with your little middle school boyfriend? Or what does like a healthy relationship look like trying to sort out arguments? What kind of argumentation style do you have? Those kinds of things. High school, it ramps up, it gets a little bit more intense. We're talking about the risks that come with sexual activity. We talk about STDs, we talk about pregnancy, but still at an age appropriate and level, and trying to make it engaging for them. So we have all sorts of demonstrations and little games that we play and competitions that we'll have. And the kids actually really enjoy it. And I got a lot of feedback when I was doing it of the kids being like, no one's talked to me about this before. This is like brand new information to me, which is scary to have 17-year-olds say that, because you know that their friends are out. And the downside is you do hear horror stories of what these kids are getting into. And it gets earlier and earlier. Every year it's younger and younger. So it's not, if we're waiting until high school to start having these conversations, it is way too late.
Right. Well, and I think one of the things, this is actually the program we get the most pushback on.
Yeah.
Even Christians, well, I think kids deserve all options, and kids are just going to do it anyway, and we need to make it safe. And those things there's such misconceptions. So the first thing is kids are hearing about sex constantly.
Yeah.
Like, we have never walked into a public school and had kids be like, wait, sex?
No.
Other gender? Like, there's boys and girls out there that are different than me, and like, they're not shocked by this information. They're hearing about sex through TV, music, social media, peers, older siblings, whatever.
Yeah.
And so it's not like they don't know,
right,
that you can have sex. It's not like they don't know that there's birth control out there, or there's condoms out there, or those kinds of things. Our particular program does not talk about birth control and condoms.
No, we mention it as in like, listen, you need to know that if this is the route you're going to go, it's not 100% effective.
Right.
Like, abstinence is the only 100% way.
But we're not going to be like
preventing.
teaching them like, this is how you get birth control.
No,
or this is how you put a condom.
No.
And so when someone says, oh, I want kids to hear all options, what they don't realize is they are hearing all options.
Yeah.
And the one thing that they're not hearing is the option to say no.
Yeah.
The option to say not now, the option to say I'm not ready for that. Because they're hearing every other source in their life, except for hopefully their parents and their church. If their parents are on the ball, which we'll talk about in a minute, and if they're in church, which a lot of churches don't talk about at all, they'll hear every other source is telling them sex is no big deal, sex is empowering, sex is freeing, everyone's doing it. Here's how you do it safely.
Yeah.
And we could be the only voice, or one of very few voices, saying, no, it's okay to say no. And there's like valid reasons to say, this is not a good time in my life to have sex.
Right.
And then so then every once in a while we have a rep in Pennsylvania who will say, no, we need to teach comprehensive sexuality education. We don't want to teach abstinence. And everyone's like, oh, comprehensive. Like, that sounds great. No, it's not great. It's horrifying. Yeah. They're teaching kids as young as 5 about touching yourself, and what masturbation is, and what an orgasm is, and how to put a condom on a banana, and like those kinds of things. And it becomes extremely explicit, which is so inappropriate for children in school.
Yeah, it's not age appropriate at all.
And it's also teaching kids, it's really grooming kids to think that if I feel uncomfortable, there's something wrong with me. So I was watching, there's a website, we won't list it, but there's a website that's well known for teaching comprehensive sexuality education, and you can go on, you can look for videos and you can look for them by age. And so I was looking at them because I'm like, I want to see what's being taught in some of these schools. And I looked at the one for kindergartners, 5-year-olds. And it was the little boy and a little girl and a teacher, and the little boy and the little girl are naked with their teacher. The teacher's not naked. So that's something. And the little girl is like, this is great. I'm so comfortable. And the little boy is like, I'm so uncomfortable. And the whole video was about how he shouldn't feel uncomfortable being naked in front of his teacher.
No, you should definitely feel uncomfortable being naked, regardless of what age you are. That should be so uncomfortable. Yeah.
Yes. And so if you are a child, age 5 years old, you should feel uncomfortable disrobing in front of a teacher and a student.
Yeah, I was like, you should. Yeah, your classmates.
That's not okay. And so they're showing 5-year-olds this video about how, like, you should feel totally comfortable.
Yeah, that's just grooming children.
It's grooming children to think that disrobing in front of adults is healthy. Mm-hmm. And if you don't feel okay with it, then something's wrong with you. Mm-hmm. And I sure as heck want my kids to feel uncomfortable if someone wants them to take their clothes off in front of another adult. In fact, we talk a lot with my kids age appropriately, and most of them are beyond this now, not babies, but about, like, if an adult says something to you in, like, it sounds like this, or they're talking about this, or they want you to keep a secret, like, you need to come tell me right away. Mm-hmm. Like, I certainly wouldn't want them thinking, oh no, the school says it's totally fine. So we've been referencing this as abstinence since we started, and that's a very common term. Mm-hmm. And abstinence can be a lot of things. You could abstain from sex, you could abstain from alcohol, you could abstain from smoking, drinking, drugs. And we teach kids to abstain from a lot of things. We tell them don't smoke, don't drink, don't do drugs.
We don't teach them how to do drugs safely. Well, we used to not teach them how to do drugs safely, but now there's a lot of people pushing for that. But we used to not teach. You don't teach people how to smoke safely.
No, we don't teach kids, oh, this is how you drink safely. At least we shouldn't be, although that's also starting with, like, this idea of, oh, drink at home, and parents hosting parties for their kids
underage drinking is what we're talking about. Yeah.
And so when we're talking about children, okay, these are children, 18 years and younger. Mm-hmm. The vast majority are going to be 18 and younger. Yeah. We should not be giving them the message of you can have sex safely, because at 18, 17, 16, 15 and younger, you cannot.
Oh, there's risks involved with having sex.
There's physical, emotional, social, psychological risks associated with having sex, and kids deserve to know that. So the current buzzword is not abstinence, although that's usually how we refer to it because it's more common. People understand what you're saying when you say that. It is sexual risk avoidance. Yeah. So safe sex, condoms, birth control, whatever, is commonly called sexual risk reduction. So you're not getting rid of the risk. There is still a risk.
Yeah, you're just trying to reduce.
Right. Even if you use condoms 100% of the time and you use them correctly, which most kids are not, you're still putting yourself at risk for STDs and pregnancy, not to mention all the emotional, social, psychological risks that you can't use a condom for. Birth control is not 100%, and it doesn't do anything for STDs, much less all of the other social, emotional, psychological risks of sex.
Well, now there's all sorts of studies talking about, like, the damage that birth control can actually do to women, especially, like, the younger you take it, because you're still not really developed at 17. Right. I mean, that's the reality of it, is, like, you're not, and so now you're. Yeah.
I actually have a book. This was not planned at all, but it's right here on the shelf. And it's called This Is Your Brain on Birth Control, The Surprising Science of Women Hormones and the Law of Unintended Consequences. And this is on my short list of things to read because I want to know. Like, birth control is pushed as this sort of solve all your problems drug to women. And we know that it's a carcinogen. We know that it causes issues with your hormones. We know that it causes issues with your weight, your mood, and your skin, and, like, all that stuff. So what else is going on? And I think that we're doing teens a disservice by saying, oh, just put them on birth control. And this idea that they're going to do it anyway.
Right. And that's something that I was always talking with my students about, was, when people say that to teenagers, it is so degrading and demeaning to be like, you're nothing better than your impulses, essentially. Is what they're saying, and they're just being drilled every single day that you are never going to be able to overcome any sort of impulse that you feel. And teenagers feel impulses, right? That's human nature. But to tell students to their face that you will never be more than this impulse. We talk about Fido and Fifi, and so we would give the example of Fido and dogs. Essentially, and that Fido would see Fifi, and he would have like this innate
Instinct.
That's
Yes.
what I was looking for. Like this instinct to reproduce, because that's what dogs do. Like you see them, like they're weird at the dog park. Like they don't have any reason or logic or capability of thought, right? He has the instinct, like there's a good looking dog, I'm gonna go for it. And people, public school teachers, adults, parents, society, teach children that they are essentially no better than Fido. And that they're going to see somebody and they're just going to do it.
And they can't stop themselves.
And that they can't stop themselves. And that's perfectly fine if they don't want to stop themselves. Here's something that might has a 70-ish% chance of reducing any harm.
Right. And that's not fair. Kids have self-control.
Yeah.
And they deserve parents, teachers, important adults in their life who are willing to say you are stronger and smarter than your physical impulse to have sex.
Yeah.
And I, as your parent, as your teacher, as your trusted adult, want to help you with tips and tricks and tools so that you don't end up in a compromising situation.
Right.
And so that you can wait to make a choice about sex, we would say, until you are in a lifelong committed relationship.
Commonly known as marriage.
Commonly known as marriage. And parents, and I'm going to take a break and talk to parents. So my oldest is 14, and I've had people say, well, you don't know what it's like because your oldest is only 14. Okay, well, he's getting older all the time. Parents,
every minute.
We need to stand up for our kids and stand up to our kids and tell them, no, you don't get to look at porn. Because I know I know parents personally who are like, well, they're going to look at it anyway. No.
Or they think that porn isn't as bad as going out and doing
right. So we're
doing
just going to let them.
So like we'll let them do porn.
Will rewire their brain and make it hard for them to have healthy relationships. So don't allow them to do that. If they're on their phone or their tablet, take it away. You're the parent. Maybe they shouldn't have one if they can't be responsible. If you feel like they absolutely need a phone, they can't function without a phone, then put controls on it so they can't get to those sites.
Give them like the old school flip phones that we had back in the day.
Yes. Don't allow your kids to have sleepovers with their significant other in your house.
Yeah, you would think that would be a no-brainer, but
it's not.
Even in Christian circles.
Like, well, I want them to be safe. I want them to feel secure. I want them to this or that. No,
we're like, oh, they're in separate rooms.
Yeah, even if they're not, even if they are.
Yeah, you're like, it doesn't matter.
But I know parents, I personally know parents who have allowed their kids to have sleepovers in the same room, knowing that their kids are having sex at 16, 17 years old. Your daughter, your son, that's their bedroom where they should feel safe. They shouldn't feel like they can't say no.
Yeah.
Because mom and dad say it's okay if I have my boyfriend over. Talk to your kids about boundaries, about impulses, about what the Bible says and what God says and what you expect as a parent. And then make sure that they know that if they do mess up, they can come to you. So there's that other extreme, right? There's the extreme of like, oh, we want our kids to feel we're totally open and we're going to put our daughter on birth control and we're going to give our son condoms and they can sleep over with their boyfriend and girlfriend in their bedroom. That's wrong. But it's also wrong to say, well, if you get pregnant, I'm throwing you out of my house.
Right.
Because then you're not discussing it. You're not helping them understand. You're just saying, well, if this consequence happens, then I want to kick you out. And that's very tough as like someone who runs a pregnancy center, because I've got a teenager sitting across from me crying because she's afraid she's going to be homeless because she did mess up and she did have sex and now she's pregnant and she needs to know that her parents are a soft place to land. And so you can have standards as a parent and you can have like, this is what I expect from you and still make sure that your kids know. But if things go wrong, please come talk to me. Like, no, I don't want you to have sex. No, I don't approve. No, I don't think it's a good idea. And here's all the reasons. But I understand things happen. I understand you may make choices that I don't agree with. And I still want you to feel comfortable talking to me.
Well, at the end of the day, sin is sin. And so, it's okay to call a spade and say like, nope, like this is a sin. Mm-hmm. But on the flip side, it's not some worse sin than any other type of sin. And I think in Christian circles, sometimes we've kind of elevated it to like a special level of sin. And that's not to say that there isn't different types of sin that have different consequences, because certainly you could end up with an STD for life. And that STD is going to impact your future relationships and potentially give a future spouse the same STD. Obviously pregnancy is a consequence. So there are consequences to sin, but it's not like some greater worse sin
Right.
than anything else. And we need to stop treating it as such, I think.
Yeah. And so there needs to be that balance of teaching kids that sex outside of marriage is wrong. And parents, that goes for you too. Like, if you're not married, don't have sex with your boyfriend, or don't do one night stands, and don't invite guys back to the house, because then you have no standing when you're talking to your kids. If you are a senior listening to this and your spouse has passed on, that's not carte blanche. What do they call
Right.
it? You're not getting a blank check to go out and have sex with anyone you want because you're 60 and you can't get pregnant. Abstinence, chastity, that's something that's part of the Christian life from cradle to grave. And so if you're not married, I'm going to break this down for everyone. If you're not married, don't have sex. If you are married, only have sex with your spouse. And honestly, if we could have an entire generation that embraces that, we would kill every STD in one generation.
Yeah.
We would have no more STDs. We would 85% of abortions would be gone, because 85% of abortions happen with unmarried women. And I would lay money that the 15% that are remaining, that a significant percent of those are babies that are not with their husbands.
Yeah.
And so if we, men and women, this is not just men, this is not just women, men and women committed to saying, I'm not going to have sex until I get married, and I'm not going to have sex with anyone but my spouse, our world would be a much better place.
Right. So taking this as an opportunity to kind of segue, because a lot of people, and we've gotten pushback before, and I'm sure people will have questions when this comes out about why is a pregnancy center so invested in talking about abstinence with teenagers beyond just preventing teenage pregnancy.
Right.
Like, what does this have? That's
right?
a huge part.
Yeah.
But like, what does abstinence have to do with abortion?
So you can look at the Pennsylvania abortion report. They release it every year in January.
Yeah.
And you can see, I think the current number is 80. It's usually 84 to 86% of abortions are performed on unmarried women.
Right.
So if people choose abstinence until marriage, we reduce the number of abortions.
Mm-hmm.
It's a natural outgrowth of that. There's a lot of other things that are reduced. STDs, like damage to relationships, damage to people, domestic violence, because a lot of girls are in violent relationships in high school and their early 20s, because they've adopted this broken view of themselves because they've had sex. And so they're like, oh, I'm not worth, I can't say no.
Mm-hmm.
And so now I'm stuck in this violent relationship. So there's lots of other social ills, because we want to build strong families and we want to build strong communities that are built on families.
Right.
And so having healthy sexual relationships with your spouse is really important for that. But really, when you boil it down to its essence, it is that if we can prevent unmarried sex, we can prevent abortion.
Yeah.
And it's pretty straightforward. But we need parents on board. We need teachers on board. We need people who are willing to go to their school and say, hey, I heard about this great program. It's called Healthy Relationships Today. They fulfill the state requirement. They'd love to come in for free. Talk to your teachers. If you are a teacher and you teach middle school or high school, we'd love to talk to you and see about getting it in your school. And if you're a parent, we'd love to help you talk to your kids. So we have just a couple minutes, and then we'll close. But talking to your kids about sex should be something that starts very early. So if you have children, unless that child is an infant, you should probably already be talking about it. So I personally, and I'm not trying to put myself up as like the gold standard, I can tell you what I do.
Yeah.
I start with potty training, and we start talking about good touch, bad touch. And like, because now you're using the potty and you're starting, like, other people are taking you to the potty, and like, you have to know like what's okay and what's not okay. And then as my kids ask questions and things come up a lot earlier, I think, in our household, just because I run a pregnancy center.
Sure.
We answer those questions. And so by the time they're 8 or 9, they understand like the mechanics of sex, and they start having more conversations, usually with dad, because I have all boys, by 10, 11, 12, about things like pornography and girls and what's appropriate and what's not appropriate. And we do have filters on their devices. They don't use them unsupervised, but we still have filters. And we talk a lot about like, okay, like, what if your friend is like, wants to show you something? What if someone says, hey, look at this video on my phone, like, you need to come tell mom and dad right away. And then as they get into those teenage years, then we talk more about like self-control and what does the Bible say? And like, all of my kids are professing Christians, the older ones.
Mm-hmm.
And so what does God say? What does Jesus want from you? And so those are conversations that need to be constantly happening in your home. And it shouldn't really ever be this giant, like, oh, let's sit down and talk about it. Like, it really should be a continuing conversation.
Right.
Like, how does my body work? How do things change?
It's not the talk.
Right. You can't sit down with your kids
and have the talk, yeah.
and explain and be like, oh, I'm done now.
Right.
I did it. I explained it. Don't do it. Done.
Yeah.
And I did not grow up in a household necessarily where things were super clear. Some things were really clear because I had a grandma who was a public health nurse, and I'm still really traumatized about a few things. But then there was other times where it was just really awkward, and I think it is awkward. It's uncomfortable.
I think it's supposed to be uncomfortable, like to some extent, like it's a very private thing that we're talking about. And I think the push to make it not feel uncomfortable is a little bit odd. Yes. Like, and that's not like kids should feel comfortable talking to their parents about things, but there is also this level of like, no, this is something that is private, and we have publicized our sexual activity. We've shouted our abortions. We have completely and totally blown the doors wide open on things that I think are intended to be private.
Yeah. And so again, it's that balance. Talk to your kids, make sure they understand. They should be hearing it from their parents, not from the school, not from media.
Yeah,
certainly not from their peers, because they don't know what they're talking about.
Yeah.
And if you're not sure how to talk about it, definitely reach out. You can email podcast@promiseoflifenetwork.org. We actually have a really cool workbook. We have a whole box of them. They're kind of old, but they're so good. And it's a biblical walk through sexuality with your kids, and like, what does God say and how are we created in God's image? They were donated to us from someone who used to run a pregnancy center. I absolutely love them. I would love to see families using them. And if you need like more information,
we also have some resources on the Sarah and Bowen website about pornography and talking with your kids about sex. And so I would definitely, we'll put the link in the description box.
Yes,
and I'll try to remember.
We're not always doing, but we will.
Sometimes YouTube doesn't let me put the link, and I don't know what to do.
Yeah, so you can go to sarahandbowen.com. Gospel of Sex. We have some information on like talking to your kids about different topics, and it's like they're parent guides. They're really good. They're very
put together by our HRT coordinator, our previous one.
Yeah.
Lydia. And now we actually, starting this school year, we have 2 new HRT employees, I guess we'll call them.
Also named Lydia.
Both of them are also named Lydia. So we had 3 Lydias. All 3 of them were in HRT. And so now we have Lydia 2.0 and Lydia 3.0 are taking over the HRT positions, which we're super excited about.
We are. Yeah, it's going to be great to have 2. We had to do some weird combo with some other work, but so it could be really good not to have just one person going into the schools. And they're all named Lydia.
Yeah, and so we'll just refer to Lydia as like an entity, but it's actually 2 people.
Right, and we've also been referring to them as the Lydias.
The Lydias.
Yes,
like
they're not.
Lydias. No.
They're just masks of Lydias.
Yeah.
And when actually the first Lydia emailed me, because like she's great and we still talk. And I was like, you're never gonna guess. You are never gonna guess the names of the 2 people that we've hired to run.
Both of them are Lydia. It's great. I love Lydia, the entity. Mm-hmm. All of them.
Lydia's wonderful. All 3 of them.
All 3 of them.
Lydia.
So
talk to your kids about what the Bible says.
And what does the Bible say? Because taking this to the Jesus moment of the day, yes. My pastor yesterday, because we're filming this on a Monday, talked about, we're in Proverbs for like our evening services. And so last night was Proverbs 25, which doesn't specifically talk about like, do not have sex outside of marriage, but it does talk a lot about self-control and patience and timeliness. And that was kind of like what our focus of the sermon was last night. And I think it's super applicable when we talk about sexual activity. Having patience, I think, is a really key thing, especially for people in their 20s or 30s who aren't married yet, or who perhaps are called to a life of singleness. Patience. There's a time and a place for everything.
Yes.
And ultimately, we were given self-control, and it's something that we constantly have to foster, and pray that the Lord fosters it in us, because self-control, it's a fruit of the Spirit.
Yes.
And so we can't do it on our own. Fostering your own self-control is very, very difficult. So we need to pray for self-control.
And we need to support each other.
And we need to,
and
be accountable.
married couples need to support single people.
Yeah.
Like,
and other single people need to support single people too. Single people need supported.
And married couples need to support each other too.
Yeah.
If you're talking to your bestie, guy or girl, and you feel like they're walking into a situation they should not walk into, say something. Say something.
Yeah.
And I think especially guys.
Yeah.
Have a hard time with that.
Just because, just the nature of being a dude, I guess.
I can't say that.
We can't talk about our feelings.
Oh my goodness, it's a football. Just talk
which
about
is
football.
a real bummer because they're also like super visual people, which is why, generally speaking, men struggle more with pornography than women. But pornography is, I was about to say, like, pornography is rampant in women too. Like, I know people, women who I look up to who have struggled with pornography in the past. So it's not just a guy thing.
We should do a separate.
We should.
Yeah. But I'm going to read from Galatians 5, verse 16. I say, walk by the Spirit, and you will not gratify the desires of the flesh. For the desires of the flesh are against the Spirit, and the desires of the Spirit are against the flesh. Okay, so we have a war inside of us. I'm not talking about the weird wolf thing that everybody always brings up. But, like, if you're a Christian, you have your fleshly desires, and then you have your spirit desire, the desires of the Spirit. And our goal needs to be to fill those spirit desires and not fulfill our fleshly desires.
Yeah.
These are opposed to each other to keep you from doing the things you want to do. Okay, this is the Bible. The Bible's telling us these are two things that are direct competition with each other.
Yeah.
So you want to be pure, you want to follow God, you want to make good decisions, and your flesh is constantly fighting that.
Right.
Okay. If you are led by the Spirit, you are not under the law. Now the works of the flesh are evident: sexual immorality, impurity, sensuality. Okay, and then it goes on and it talks about a couple other things. But the first three are related to sex: sexual immorality, impurity, and sensuality. So clearly this is a big issue.
Yeah.
And the Lord wants us to focus on sexual purity, chastity.
Mm-hmm.
And other places it talks a little more about what that definition is. So lean on the Lord. If you are a dude, find a dude. Your pastor, someone at your church that you can trust, that you can be accountable to. If you're a lady, find a lady. If you are a teenager, talk to your parents. And if you're a parent, talk to your kids.
Yeah.
We need to have these conversations. We need to talk about what God expects from us, what God wants from us, and how we can fulfill it. Yeah. So if you want to learn more about HRT, our Healthy Relationships Today program, you can go to hrtrocks.org.
Yeah. I
always get the dot wrong.
Yeah.
hrtrocks.org. You can also email podcast@promiseoflifenetwork.org. We'd love to tell you more about that. You can check out our resources at sarahandbowen.com. And the workmanship book is actually not on the website, but I'll throw it up. I don't feel comfortable selling it because it's not really ours, but people can certainly just request it and we can mail it to you, or you can come pick it up. So thank you so much for tuning in to Pro-Life Without Borders, and we will see you next week. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Please share this content with your friends. And if you have any suggestions, we are emotionally ready to do.
Yeah.
Thank you. Have a great day.